Hi everybody, this is Camille, Women's Grandmaster from Midwest USA. And here with this video, I'm kind of following up my first video about my game from Manila Chess Olympiad. I started talking about tempo moves in chess and tactical operations. And I will proceed to give you some more examples. Now, for those who hasn't seen the first video, what I consider tactical play in chess is not only different motifs, like double attack or pin or deflection. I understand a tactical sequence in a broader sense of the word as a forced variation or series of forced variations that make your opponent and yourself play in a certain way, not leaving too many options. And tempo moves is what usually forces the play. First one is check, forces the play for obvious reasons. Second is capture or attack, or capture or exchange. And that is something that Nimzowitsch already talked about in his classic book, My System. And the third one is attack. Now, when you calculate variations in a tactical sequence, you always have to start with tempo moves. Doesn't mean you have to go for it at the end, but you have to check if it works or not. If it doesn't work, you can go back to your positional plan. And usually you start calculating these moves in that order. You start with a check because check forces the game most. You have to take care of your king. You cannot really ignore it. Capture and attack are kind of interchangeable. I would say capture and exchange probably goes second. Doesn't mean they are always stronger than attack. Depends how powerful is the attack and how difficult it is to defend. But yes, probably you should look at capture first, and if it doesn't work, you look at attack. But let's see some examples. And it will be more clear what I mean. Because indeed, in some positions, you cannot see a clear tactical motif. You have to go by forced variation, choosing your move. One more thing. Now, I'm showing you the first position from the game Reshevsky-Kovalik, USA, 1973. And White actually made a mistake at this point. He went bishop e5. Now, why don't you think a little bit? It's not a very complicated problem, but I would say you have to think at least for a minute and try to find what black should do, keeping in mind that you are looking for tempo moves, checks, captures, and maybe attacks. Okay, I hope you found it. Now, of course, the obvious capture would be bishop takes e5 check, but the problem is after queen takes e5 check, rook g7, rook g3, you are simply lost. But black has another check. Queen takes g2. White absolutely has to take. King takes g2. Let's move it on the board. Queen takes g2. King takes g2. Bishop takes e5. Discover check. Now white has to take care of his king. Now, let's say so king f1, doesn't really matter where it goes, and bishop takes d6, and black ends up with an extra piece and a winning position. Now, this is, of course, so a very, very simple example, but I just wanted to show you the idea behind a tempo move. First of all, so you know that you have to look for some, in some positions especially, because so if you remember, we started with a position that was pretty suspicious for black, and if he doesn't find some tactical sequence, he's probably lost. And then you just go logically. If that move doesn't work, bishop takes e5 doesn't work, then must be another check to look for. And then so then you come to queen takes g2. Okay, let's go to another position that is a little bit more complicated. That is just the beginning. Okay, here we come with another position, also full of tempo moves, slightly longer. But if you know what to look for, you will be able to find some right away. This is from a game Furman-Ubilava in USSR 1971. So I do hope that nobody has seen it so far. I try to find some games that are not very usual. And again, black's back is to the wall, because so white knight is attacking three pieces actually. Queen b8, rook f8, and knight on e5. And obviously, if black takes a knight on d7, white will take the rook on c4. So that is not a good option. Black really has to look for tempo moves, or he's simply lost. And here comes, looking at checks first. And the only check in the position, obviously, is knight f3 check. And you are opening white king with that move, because he has to take. King h1 loses to queen takes h2. But what happens next? Again, you have to look for checks. And remember, when you look for checks, another principle, very important. If you have a check that includes another piece into attack, that is usually the first move you look at. Your rook on f8 is not participating yet, so rook g8 check. King h1 is the only move. Now again, you have to find the way to go on with checks. Otherwise, your attack will come to nothing. If you give him a breather, he will be able to defend. For example, if you move your queen to c7, he has his own checks, such as queen b2 check and rook g1 later on. You have to do something right now. Queen takes h2 check. King takes h2, and rook h4 checkmate. So as you see, again, it looks longer, but if you know what you are looking for, it shouldn't be too difficult. Let's go to the next one, even longer than that. Okay, here we go with another example of checks especially. And I will give you about 8 moves. Again, if you know the principles, it is all doable. But try to calculate that variation and let's see how far you were able to go. Give that one at least 5 minutes or so. Because it's not easy to calculate that long if you are not used to it. Now, I hope you gave it a good try. First step. Evaluating the position, you can see that black has an extra pawn and actually would have good winning chances. The pawn on d4 is hanging too. All black's pieces look to be well positioned. If white doesn't do something right away, he will probably lose this game. So white has to look into checks, and white has to look into attacking the black king, because that is obviously his best option right here. The king is kind of open. Knight to g6 check, the only check that makes sense, because rook g8 would simply lose that rook to queen takes g8. Now, black has to take, because going with the king to g5 would simply lose his queen to knight f4 check, discover check, attacking the queen. H takes g6. Now, I don't know if you remember, Amy, so I was telling this another example, that if you have a choice, you always try to include another piece into attack. Queen h4 check. Queen is coming into fray, and not only giving a check, but also attacking the pawn on f6. That is important. For example, if black goes queen h5, trying to bring his piece to defense, queen takes f6 check, king h7, and queen f7 check leads to checkmate. Because right now, say after king h6, again I go with check, queen f8, king h7, rook f7, bringing the last piece in with checkmate. Very typical. Everything happens with checks, and I try to include all my pieces if possible. Now, let's go back a little bit. Black doesn't have to play queen h5. Let's say black goes king to g8, trying to avoid the check on f6. Rook takes g6, check, obviously. King f8, queen takes f6, check. King e8, queen f8 check, king to d7, and again rook f7 check. The principles work again. I am including my last piece. And now black actually resigned in the game Zaitsev-Furman, USSR 1967. Because his only way is to give up the queen, queen takes f7, and even that does not help. White would not even take that queen, but would go rook d6 check. Remember I said so that when you look at tempo moves, you look at checks first, not captures. King c7 and queen d8 checkmate. Again, so the main difficulty with this example is that you have to calculate that deep. But since all moves come with checks, I strongly encourage you to practice that and see if you can do it. That is essential to become a better player. Okay, here we come with an example that actually has to do with captures and attacks. Let's look at White's position from that point of view. He obviously has an attack going on the king's side, but how to proceed? I will give you maybe 3 minutes for that one. Because so the attack that White is trying to use is not very apparent. Try to think. And I am not saying it starts with attack. It may start with a capture. Okay, hope you gave it some thought. The way it goes actually, knight takes f8 check. White is exchanging his good knight, but his idea is to clear the b1 h7 diagonal. Maybe I'll give you a few more seconds if you didn't see that motif. Try to find the solution now. Okay, hope you did it. And after this, White goes bishop to b3. Now Black's problem is his knight on b4 is protecting the c2 square right now, but the knight is under attack. And if it goes away, bishop c2 will pin the black queen. Black tried the last resource, queen b1. think it's game Chonk in Terros from second 1970, trying to counterattack white's bishop. Usually it's a good try. It's a good idea to look for counterattacks first when you look at your move. Doesn't work in this case because white simply goes away bishop d1. And he still has the bishop c2 threat and bishop b4 threat. So black resigned because he loses his piece, and after that, he's completely lost. Okay, here we have another example of captures and attacking moves. Quite often these two go together, as you saw in the previous one. But this example also shows that sometimes you can win an early position like this one. So this is, I believe, move 13 in the game from Miles Schmidt, London, 1977. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking for tactical sequences. They are everywhere. So I could refer you as far as to Alekhine's games, who was very adept at looking for very concrete moves right after the opening or during the opening. And now Miles uses the same strategy over here. Why don't you also take another 5 minutes or so, because this variation goes 5 moves deep and it also has branches. It's quite cute. You will see. And I will come back to you. Okay. As you see, so there are no checks in this position, so we have to look at captures. Here goes. D takes c6. Now, obviously, if black takes b takes c6, which is a side variation, what white has in mind is what you probably saw many times in Spanish-type positions. Just a different opening here, but same motif. Bishop takes c5, d takes c5, e takes d8, rook takes d8, and knight takes e5, winning a pawn with clear advantage. But obviously, black was not as simple as that, and he had another capture in mind. Now, again, remember, when you have captures, you have to look at all possible captures, not just one. And after d takes c6, black thought, I have knight takes e4. And now after knight takes c4 and knight takes c4, if white takes, he takes b7, bishop takes b7, and black is okay. He developed his bishop, and he simplified the position. Now, in a King's Indian structure like this one, it is usually good for black if he manages to exchange some pieces, because one of his main problems is the lack of space, and he would be quite happy with this one. The d6 pawn is kind of an academic weakness. It's not so easy to attack in practice. But let's go back. That's not what white had in mind. After knight takes e4, now white switches from capture mode to attack mode. Now, do you see a sort of double attack for white? I'll give you 3 more seconds for that. Okay, here goes, queen d5. Now, in a way, this move is very typical, because if you want to take your queen in the middle of the battle, you should be looking for either attack on the king or double attack, in most cases. And that is precisely what white is doing over here. And you would be surprised, but queen is probably the piece that does most double attacks, not the knight. It's just that this attack is so unexpected and it's kind of cute. White is attacking the knight on e4 and the pawn on b7 indirectly. Now, if black goes knight c5, trying to defend both, obviously bishop takes c5, capture. After b takes c6, white simply takes queen takes c6, attacking the rook on a8, which leaves him with extra pawn. And there is a very cute variation when black takes on c5. D takes c5, c takes b7, queen takes d5, b takes c8, queen. And now it's kind of funny because both queens are under attack, but white is already ahead in material and it just doesn't matter so much. If black tries to have a mad queen and sell it early with queen takes f3, counting on g takes f3, rook takes c8 with a good game, white says, wait a minute, my queen can be a little bit mad too. Queen takes e8. And white wins. So as you see, what happened in the game, black simply went down after the previous variation, after b takes c6 and queen takes c6. But you see how easily white obtained, because he was on the lookout for tempo moves. Okay, so what we have here, please take your time to start one. Again, it is attacks and captures. And this goes for 6 moves. So it takes some time. And this is a game Chirich Tal, and Tal being an attacking player, as everybody knows, of course, went for this combination, but it only shows that if the combination doesn't work, even Tal sometimes cannot do anything. Now, let's see what really happened in the game. I'm giving you some time to think about possible tactical operation for black. Here goes. Now, black would like to have a typical Sicilian move, knight takes e4. The idea is to lure white piece on e4 and then play d5. But right away, it does not work because of bishop takes c7 check, king takes c7, knight takes e4, d5, b4 at Zwischenzug, attacking the queen. And now what happens? If black takes one of the pieces, for example, d takes e4, I have a check with the queen on c3. And I will win your queen with the next move. If black goes back with the queen, queen d8, still trying to protect the pawn on d5, white has a very strong attacking move, rook a to d1. Again, so main principles work. If checks do not work, make an attacking move. And incidentally takes one more piece into play, so it should be a good move. Now, as you see, again, you cannot take on e4 or c4 because of queen c3 check, and black, so he cannot get his piece back. Keeping that in mind, that is not what Tal played. He tried to set up that combination a little bit differently. So what he did, he played e7, e5 first. Bishop e3 is the only move. And now he went for the knight takes e4. And using same ideas, try to think, how can you refute black's plan? Here goes. Knight takes e4. Obvious move. You cannot just leave that move unchallenged. Oh, sorry. My bad. In fact, so knight takes e4 would be okay for black after d5 this time. Because so if we continue the way we did before, say b4 over here. Now we don't have the check on black king, so black can simply take one of the white's pieces like d takes e4 and he will be okay. So, keeping that in mind, what white did, after knight takes e4, he went b4 right away. Queen d8, because black has to keep his queen in such a position so it will protect the pawn on d5. Knight takes c4. Now let's go back one more move. If instead of knight takes c4, white cannot go b5 right away, because black goes knight takes c3, b takes c6, and e4, another tempo move. Now watch how he played. And that protects the c3 knight. This sequence doesn't work. Instead of b5, knight takes c4, d5, and b5 at this point, at Zwischenzug, classical Zwischenzug. D takes c4, queen takes d8, rook takes d8, and b takes c6 with a winning position. Okay, here comes the last example, and I really wanted to show this one because white side is the first great female player, Nona Gaprindashvili, the one who showed that women can really play as well as men, the first men's grandmaster. Also, technically, it could be Vera Menchik, but the first official men's grandmaster, who after many years showed that women can play well again. And she is playing one of her main rivals in these years, Polychroniade from Romania. It's from 1974, when Nona was at her height still. And what it shows also, Gaprindashvili is white, Polychroniade is black. And obviously white has an advantage over here. All his pieces are more active. And it shows that quite often, when your pieces are placed well, the combination from your opponent's side simply does not work. And you should be looking for refutation. Again, you have to look how exactly you do it, but but there is a good chance the refutation will be here. Again, like in previous example, black goes knight takes e4, knight takes e4 and d5, forking two knights and trying to free her position. White responds with bishop to g5. She is trying to create some overload in black's position, some imbalance. So what happens now? Obviously, after queen d7, white would go knight b6. So she cannot do that, right? After bishop e7, white would go knight to d6 check. And after king goes away, black cannot take because of the pin, white would go queen takes d5. So black plays the natural move f6. Again, so that would be the first tempo move to look at, because so right now, three white pieces are under attack. And often it is a good idea to attack as many pieces as you can, because your opponent will not be able to save all of them. Here goes the combination. Bishop takes f6, g takes f6, and queen takes d5. Now if queen takes d5, knight takes f6 with a fork on king and queen, and white has an extra pawn with a winning position. Black tried to create counterplay with knight to d4, castles long, bishop to e7. But white just finished the game real quick. Knight e to d6 check, takes, knight to d6 check, king e7, again tempo move to look at. Morphy style, rook takes d4. E takes d4 and rook e1 check, bringing the last rook to attack. Black resigns. very good effort by White and very good example of tempo moves. I hope you were able to find it. And I hope we will have fun with tactics again in near future. I love tactics and I hope so do you. See you later. Bye.